Recently, strange reports have simply appeared within the halls of the Inquisition's records on Holy Terra itself. These reports were penned in High Gothic by Damian Karinkov of the Logis Strategos and by Lilac Denovich of the Templar Psychologists. Concerningly, both individuals have been dead since M32. Due to the suspicious context regarding the information therein, please use your best judgment when applying and verifying these reports. The Black Bloods are a complex and interwoven warband formed from the remnants of the 11th Company of the 8th Legion, the Night Lords. They and their conquests are led by Decipus Irex, the so-called Rancor Prince. They operate as a force of battle brothers, conquered levies, and interconnected allies, all bound together by fear, codependency, and mutual understanding like the ancient gangs of Nostromo once were. Chief among the forces, within a sphere of influence, is Decipus's greatest allies and most insidious threat, a small splinter cell of the Alpha Legion led by their headhunter prime, Prodicus Pythos. These enigmatic and unknowable Marines have served as close allies and co-conspirators of the Black Bloods since the beginning through a system of mutually beneficial dealings. It is through this impenetrable and horrifying combination of the Alpha Legion's infiltration and information-gathering skills and the Night Lord's lightning assaults and fear-mongering that the Warband as a whole has absorbed so many lesser assets. They seem to operate within the Gothic sector around the Archon system, which fell to their unseen machinations and midnight assaults. It would be a mistake to assume that this fact limits or otherwise influences their reach, as though their long history of fleet-based operations has left them both capable and willing to engage in far-flung raids across the wider segmentum. Once simply the 11th Company of the 8th Legion, the Black Bloods can trace their origins back to Holy Terra and the Unification Wars as the Blackguard of the 8th Legion. From these bleak and ignoble origins, however, lay the groundwork for even greater falls into debased depravity. During the Horus Heresy, the 11th Company was first on the walls of the Imperial Palace during the siege of Terra under the leadership of Gendos Krivok and Lycoryphus. However, the brutal Blood Angels' counterattack shattered the company like the rest of the Legion. Most of the Blackguard 11th Company fell under the influence of other masters or formed their own outfits, such as the Bleeding Eyes Raptor cult. To that end, Decipus and his brothers fell under Halasker, Talon Master of the 3rd Company and member of the Chiroptera. He was the Lord of the Hunter's Premonition, the battle barge that had carried the 11th for much of their history, so it was natural they would serve him. Still, just as the Night Lords broke into bands of pirates and raiders true to their nature over their gene seed, so too did their fervor and lust for vengeance wane over the 10 millennia of the Long War. Even the glory hounds that comprised the 11th Company slowly slipped into the idle depravity and directionless savagery, except for Decipus. Decipus had never lost his rabid need for vengeance, a longing that fueled him and carried his claws from target to target as Halasker's master of executions. Though he'd never given himself to Khorne, Decipus was still one of the most martially gifted warriors among Halasker's Night Lords. He was their champion consul back during the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy. He was similarly set apart as one of the Night Haunter's favoured sons with the prophetic name Rancor. Decipus had never given himself to the ruinous powers and still vehemently denied them because in his twin hearts was a hatred fanned by utter loyalty to the father who hated him and his brothers. Though he was still one of the despicable criminal savages of Nostromo that their father hated, his utility and loyalty were without question to Conrad and to Halasker. While Halasker officially led the remainder of the 11th Company and his own 3rd Company, he was always wary of Decipus, the Puritan raptor devoted so wholly to their father despite everything. Through countless merciless executions of those threats within and without, and countless deeds of dread in Halasker's name, Decipus had unknowingly shown to his lord that his old legion titles had been earned to their fullest extent. He was a locus of old legion rank and martial power that Halasker could not let fester and grow in might within his warband. After all, the Night Lords of the 11th seemed to serve him on Decipus's world and could easily turn on it. Didn't they follow Decipus into battle, rally to him, Weren't it his words and his example that gave Halasker's own name greater weight, just as Decippus and Lycoryphus had when they plunged their claws onto the walls of terror beneath the painted count, Scrivok? Was it not his anger that whet their tongues with a vengeance and set them upon that imperial assassin after Talos paved the way and their father's stolen artifacts had given them an out from their oaths to Conrad? The fact that Decippus had yet to realize the weight of his words and actions mattered not. What mattered was the weight. It may not have been enough to rally the Legion or even other talents, but it was enough for the 11th, which was dangerous on its own. By the time of the failed Krythe campaign under Abaddon the Despoiler and alongside the Exalted, things seemed to have boiled over. With such little time and too many of his own Night Lords still planetside when the Prophet's visions came, they were left behind so that Halasker and the Hunter's Premonition could escape from Blood Angel's fleet. They were to be rescued by the 10th Company and brought back to him once they had all fled from the deepest black and were free from the wrath of the Blood Angels, but such a seeming betrayal sparked conflict between Halasker and Decippus. Rather than wait for his rabid master of executions to deem his head worth taking or to finally see the power he held in his hands, he'd simply have him killed in his deluded sleep. Better to replace him than the entirety of the 11th Company in a protracted coup. It would, after all, just appear to be a quote-unquote side effect of his own visions in the aggravated warp storm, or a cowardly attack by a rival seeking his position, or another such excuse, a desperate ploy with disastrous consequences. Rather than curtail rebellion, it sparked the civil war he was trying to avoid, however short-lived it was. Despite its brevity, however, it saw no shortage of blood. By its end, the 11th Company had wrestled free from under Halasker and escaped bloodied, battered, and forever changed. Marked by betrayal after betrayal, the Black Guard rallied under Decippus and his foolish, idealistic, but impossibly trustworthy faith in brotherhood. Now entirely their own, they dipped their hands not in sinner's red, but instead paint as dark as the void. They were condemned to death in a war for vengeance against those who had wronged them. The Dark Gods, the Imperium, and Halasker, if he even still lived after the clash between him and Decippus, interrupted as it was by the vessel's damaged superstructure and 11th's breakneck escape. Thus, they mark themselves Blackbloods forevermore. The Warband is organized, like the Old Legion and many other warbands, in a gang-like structure based on charisma and force of personality. Power is determined by position and importance, but equally by how many souls they can rally to their banner and who stands by them. In this manner, the Warband can be considered 3 to 4 fangs, all working in tandem. This facet makes them decentralized to a point that is difficult to fully counter. However, it also dramatically strains their own cohesion as each is, in essence, their own independent force on the field of battle, working as allies more than a single body. Their logistical codependence is the only real tether binding them together. However, it is reinforced by Decippus's terror tactics, psychological warfare, and his agreements with their leaders. Thus, it is crucial to understand the central figures each of the fangs marshal around, for what purpose and how they interact. The fangs are, briefly, as follows. The Black Fang, made of the original Blackbloods, the remnants of the Night Lord's 11th Company. They serve Decippus Irax, the Rancor Prince, directly as terror troops and specialized elite forces. When discussing them in this context, they are ascribed the title of the Black Fang for the sake of clarity regarding them and the wider warband. The Hydra's Fang. The Alpha Legion elements of the Silent Hydra have been with the Warband as allies from the beginning. Though they technically retain their autonomy, they prefer cooperation and unity to preserve their anonymity in the galactic stage. The Iron Fang, a grouping of iron warriors from the Forge of Iskandar, joined under an ambitious young warsmith eager to prove himself the equal of his older brothers and the veterans of the Long War. The Broken Fang. Traitors and renegades that rally under the brass hearts are devoted to 2 of the ruinous powers and frighteningly possessed of occult corruption, chaos spawn, and demon-possessed shells. Though the largest of the fangs, they are comprised of cultists and fanatics easily pressed into service and scarred from their crippling defeat against Decippus Irax. Technically, the first and most notorious of these fangs, the Black Fang, is made entirely and exclusively from the original Warband's Night Lords. While the Black Bloods has expanded past the original 11th Company, its heart has never left these sons of cats. In fact, the Black Fang is a more convenient nomenclature than a proper description, as in their minds, chambers and missives, they are still the Black Bloods. At the same time, all other aspects of the Warband are merely slaves and allies. Embodying the terror tactics the Legion was known for, they specialize in rapid assault and the utter annihilation of the enemy in both body and soul. Attacks committed by this Fang are often the final blow in a long series of raids meant to weaken or completely destroy the morale of enemy defenders. However, the strange reports that have brought all this information on the Warband also attest that this Fang is also used to keep all others in line. Among their warriors are the elite host of Raptors and Warp Talents of the Black Bloods, hailing both from Decipus' time as a Night Raptor Sergeant of the 11th Company and from a contingent of Night Lords from the Bleeding Eye Raptor cult that bent the knee during their flight from the eastern fringes to the Gothic sector. While they're only a portion of the Black Blood's original ruling Night Lords, they serve as one of the most elite, despicable bodies in the band. Alongside them are the Terror Squads of the 11th, now serving as the premier infantry, and the Terminator-clad Kontaka elite. The Hydra's Fang are a headhunter cadre of the unknowable Elf Legion that has traded information and favors with the Black Bloods since their escape from Halaska in 962 M41. Though they are technically independent and only number a few dozen Marines, their reach far exceeds their numbers. For this reason, they ask Decipus to act on their information for himself and their clandestine goals. While he never pretends to know their ends, he understands the mutual nature of their arrangement and keeps a close eye on them and his own ranks. Regardless of the suspicions these two entreated allies act with, both from legions so known for cloaks and daggers, they have maintained a standing alliance and are essentially a single force. Within the grander scheme of the Warband, they train specialist cultists and traitor guards into elite cells of warriors for themselves and their Night Lord allies, such as the Veiled Daggers, who were once the proud Purulent 15th Regiment. Such cells and troops, though only loyal to the Silent Hydra, follow their orders without question and often serve to uproot Imperial defenses, infiltrate their networks, and create weaknesses just substantial enough for the fangs of the Warband to sink into. Meanwhile, their shadowy masters, sometimes known as the Veiled Host, weaken worlds for assault, invasion, corruption, and decimation. The Iron Fang, dedicated iron warriors of the warsmith Isendro Yedrek, maintain the war gear and demon engines of the Warband. Through their ties to the Dark Mechanicum and skill at siege warfare, those of the Iron Fang have carved an essential role for themselves under Isendro within the Black Bloods. As the Warband grew in power, so did their role and the rewards they reaped from Decipus, such as the industry of their recently captured base of operations in the Gothic sector, Archon Quintus, and command over his own battle group within the wider Warband's sizable fleet. However, while they are above the last of these fangs, they are still servants. Once under the Wordbearer's control, the Broken Fang have come to exalt blood, battle, thrill, and the rush of mortality under Khorne and Slaanesh. Naturally, in their bid for the favor of two rival gods, come great boons and banes in nearly equal measure that blanket swathes of their mortal and ascended followers. Traitor Astartes and rebellious slaves alike all come to know the might of Khorne in their veins, exaltations of Slaanesh in their flesh, or the wrathful ire of one or both in their broken bodies. Though traitorous guard regiments find a place within the Silent Hydra, under hives within the Forge of Iskandar, and prison chain gangs within the Black Fang, the zealous and fervorous cultists find themselves within the Broken Fang. Such is their way of staying in power and from dissolution, decimation, and the savage claws of their slave masters. In a warband of less than a chapter of Astartes that values guerrilla warfare, fearmongering, and loathe prolonged battle when it arises, they need bodies. Rather than throw valuable gene seed at turrets and fortifications that cannot be bombed and shelled, nor infiltrated and stolen, they throw waves of cultists augmented with the warp and tossed aside after. That is how the Fang has stayed relevant. However, it differs from how they first escaped destruction and gained power. At the onset of the Noctis Aeterna, this collection of the lost and the damned, gathered under the word-bearers, had founded a new cult shepherded by but two souls, Agnes and Artemisia. Possessed by demons and of the mind they needed to save their fellow sisters of battle from the lies of the false emperor, they quickly proved invaluable to the traitors and renegades holding their leash. From there, the two of them slowly grew into 25 traitorous followers of the ruinous powers granted boons of power. Where they were once beacons of faith, they were now marks of damnation and fulcrums of conversion to the pantheon. Some fell believing it was the emperor answering their desperate pleas, others were turned by these two and their masters to the dark gods. But all were now devoted to them with the same fervor they had once given the emperor. Where the Sisters of Slaughter were potent and expendable cultists, the Sisters of Sin and Agnes held one potent key for which they would be spared and even elevated: knowledge over the demonic. Centuries in the warp had taken its toll on Decipus and the 11th, whether they like it or not. The 13th claw of Night Raptors had all become warp talons. Even Decipus was turning, and many more had become forsaken and possessed. However, Agnes was trained as a master of possession by the late word-bearers. She knew how to ease their pains, keep them strong and monitor the mutations among the Night Lords. Thus, Agnes, now the dominus of possession, her sisters and all the survivors were allowed to live. By her hand, those empowered demonkin of the Black Bloods are maintained and released upon redoubts that must be distracted or otherwise engaged by the terrors of the warp with her hordes of cultists. It is by this position that she finds favor with Decipus himself. As Demonkin himself, he is often partial to both the care and empowerment of his warp talents and grants Agnes greater and greater liberties with the promise of better and better care for him and his brothers. However, he is always quick to claw down overly ambitious demands or fervor from these fanatics. The gene seed needs of the Black Bloods are as complex as their force composition. With differing needs among the fangs and various levels of mutation and tolerance, it is nearly impossible to gain gene seed reliably or efficiently from any single operation. Instead, one of the chief roles of the Hydra's fang is to infiltrate imperial systems and networks to gain insight into the most valuable means of replenishment for each of the fangs. Often these operations are carried out by their own operatives or are handed off to the fang that is best able to recover their prize with minimal losses rather than who may stand to gain the most. Such operations include core members of the Black Bloods assaulting Imperial Fist successor chapters, redoubts and making off with their gene seed into the night, while Iron Warriors siege Ravenguard's successors' facilities fortified by lowly serfs as they are. However, the Broken Fang are sent to bleed whenever such foes cannot be taken so efficiently. Their mortal hordes absorb the brunt of losses, while Sisters of Sin and Demonkin reap heavy tolls for their master's gene tithe. Being as hybridized as they are, the Black Bloods have come to specialize in a myriad of combat doctrines and styles of war. That said, it would be more accurate to say that, like the orders of the Dark Angels Legion, they have come to contain specialists in nearly every form of war rather than master them as a whole. In this way, the Fangs each carry their own doctrines, methods, and deployment preferences. Regardless, if one were to surmise their doctrines not by battlefield deployments, but by more significant campaign tendencies, then their doctrine would be one referred to by Terran scholars as the quote-unquote Fabian strategy. To surmise, it is a style of campaigning and warfare dedicated to denying protracted engagements in favor of skirmishes, degrading enemy war material and eroding their morals. Military analysts have long held that such a strategy was favorable, if not exclusive, to those with the advantage of time. However, with the transhuman gifts of the Astartes and the savagery of their masses of the lost and the damned, they can instead warp this strategy to favor their mobility and decentralized command. When on the campaign, the opening move of the Black Bloods is often a quote-unquote combined arms operation between all fangs on a central and unprepared target such as a hive world or orbital station. From here, each fang breaks into their own formations and conducts war as they will, simultaneously demanding a wide variety of responses from an enemy. Few positions can offer a proper response to each of the fangs. When one sinks in, it rapidly and lethally goes for the killing blow. In contrast, all others deny their prey the ability to reinforce or reorganize. By the time outside aid arrives, they find either a world's weapons array turned against them or a scattered force in full rout from a burned-down husk of a world.